Hi preschool one, I've got another story to share with you, one of my favorites. It's called Rosie and the Yellow Ribbon. It's written by Paula de Paolo and the pictures are by Janet Wolfe. Rosie and the Yellow Ribbon. Rosie sat on the warm front steps of her apartment building where she lived. Next to her, she had placed 20 brand new hair ribbons side by side like crayons in a box. They were a gift from her grandmother who lived far away. There were wide ribbons, narrow ribbons, satin ribbons, and lacy ribbons. Some ribbons were checkered, some had stripes, and one, a sunny yellow ribbon, had tiny white polka dots sprinkled all over it. That was Rosie's favorite. "Good morning, Rosie," called Mr. Brown from across the street. "A little bird told me that today is your birthday." Rosie smiled and waved. "I'm 6, she announced. Mr. Brown unlocked the door to his grocery store and went inside. Wearing a crisp white apron, he stepped out to throw seeds to the sparrows who perched on his sign. "Come see me later and we'll celebrate," he called to Rosie. Then he greeted his first customers for the day and he followed them into the store. Rosie saw her best friend Lucille coming down the street. Lucille would love the ribbons too. She never wore ribbons in her hair. Her mama made bows out of yarn. Carefully, Rosie gathered the ribbons. Lucille would be so surprised. "Happy birthday," said Lucille as she plopped down next to Rosie. Rosie held out her ribbons. "Lucille, look!" "Oh, you're so lucky," Lucille cried. "Nanny sent them for my birthday," said Rosie. She lined up the ribbons on the steps again. "You can have one if you want." Lucille reached for the yellow one with tiny white polka dots. "Except that one," added Rosie. "That's my favorite." "Rosie," Mama called from the window upstairs. "Nanny is on the telephone." "Be right back," Rosie told Lucille. As she bounded up the steps to her apartment, the cozy rooms were filled with the smell of chocolate cake, and chocolate icing. A birthday cake to share with Lucille. Mama handed her the phone. Uh-huh. Thank you. I will. Bye, Nanny. I love you too." Rosie gave Mama a hug and then hurried down the steps to Lucille. But something was wrong. The ribbons were all messed up and Lucille was gone. And so was the sunny yellow ribbon. Rosie searched every step. She checked each square of sidewalk and peered down the dark sewer drain. Her favorite ribbon had disappeared and she never once wore it. "What's the matter?" asked Lucille as she turned the corner. "Did you lose something?" "Yes," cried Rosie, "my yellow ribbon." "Well, where'd it go?" asked Lucille, looking around Rosie's stoop. "Maybe someone took it," Rosie said, looking straight at Lucille. "Who, me?" said Lucille. "I did not. I went to open the door for Mrs. Wiggins. Her arms broke." "Well, then where's my ribbon?" asked Rosie. "It was right there on that step." "I don't know," cried Lucille, "but I didn't take it." "Well, I left it with you, and now it's gone. You better give it back, Lucille, or else you can't have any of my birthday cake." Lucille planted her hands on her hips. "So what?" she said. "I don't like birthday cake anyway, and I don't want your ugly yellow ribbon." And then she turned and ran home. Rosie was sure that Lucille would return right away with the yellow ribbon, but when it came time to blow out the candles on the cake, she still hadn't come back. It felt strange having a birthday cake without Lucille, and it wasn't much fun at Mr. Brown's. He had made a bowl of popcorn big enough for 3. "Maybe tomorrow," said Mr. Brown. But tomorrow came and still Lucille hadn't returned. All that day, Rosie played with her ribbons until they were limp and smudged. She tried them on ponytails and braids, and after lunch she wore all 19 at once. She thought a lot about the sunny yellow ribbon, but mostly she thought about Lucille. The next afternoon, Mr. Brown celebrated Monday. He treated Rosie to a lemonade at the counter. Next to her sat a bald man. He didn't talk or laugh or spin on his seat the same way Lucille did. He didn't even make slurpy noises with his straw. Rosie slid off her stool and went home. She didn't feel like celebrating anymore. From her window, she watched the sparrows that lived on Mr. Brown's sign. She could see one of the birds as it flew in and out of the nest. Rosie remembered how every morning she and Lucille had fed the sparrows crumbs, and how in the warm afternoons they had sat on Rosie's steps and waited for them to lay their eggs. It shouldn't be long now, Mr. Brown had told them, and he knew all about the birds. A few days later, the first tiny egg had appeared in the nest. That evening, when Rosie went to Mr. Brown's for Mama, she listened for the cheep, cheep, cheep of baby sparrows. "Not yet," said Mr. Brown as he packed Mama's bread and milk into a bag. "But this afternoon, I counted 3 speckled eggs." On the way home, Rosie saw Lucille watching the sparrows from her window. It would have been fun to watch them together, Rosie thought. Everything was more fun with Lucille. Suddenly, Rosie waved, but Lucille didn't wave back. Rosie waved again. "Hi," she called in a loud voice. Lucille didn't answer. She just turned and walked away. Rosie made a decision. Tomorrow she'll tell Lucille that she can keep that yellow ribbon. I think she wants her friend back. The next morning, a blustery storm ripped through the city. Heavy rains flooded the streets and beat like pebbles against the windows. The wind howled through the narrow alleys and blew this way and that way. The garbage cans rattled, clinked down the street, and a blue umbrella bounced along the sidewalk. Rosie sat at her window, her nose pressed against the glass. She could barely see the nest through the pouring rain. She wondered if Lucille was watching too. Suddenly, a gust of wind snatched the ragged nest and tossed it into the awning. Down, down it sailed to the slippery edge. Rosie's heart pounded as she saw the nest topple and fall, landing in the middle of Mr. Brown's petunias. Rosie dashed down the stairs and out the door. "Look both ways," Mama called after her. Oh no. Lucille was already outside and running towards Mr. Brown's store. "Lucille, wait!" called Rosie as she ran to catch up. Together they crossed the deserted street and banged on Mr. Brown's door. "Mr. Brown!" called Rosie. "Hurry!" begged Lucille. The sparrows looked down from the sign as Mr. Brown scooped up the cup-shaped nest and carried it to the safety of his doorway. Rosie and Lucille followed closely behind. "Are there eggs in there?" asked Rosie, standing on tiptoe. "Did they get smushed?" asked Lucille, trying to peek inside. Said Mr. Brown as he examined the wet nest. My. There's not going to be any baby birds," cried Rosie. "See for yourselves," said Mr. Brown, cradling the nest in his hands. Rosie and Lucille peered at the nest. They saw bits of strings and twigs, feathers and leaves all woven together, and down at the bottom sat 3 speckled eggs nestled safely on a yellow ribbon with tiny white polka dots sprinkled all over it. Rosie felt her cheeks grow hot. "There's your yellow ribbon," said Lucille. "I told you I didn't take it." Rosie stared at her wet sneakers and tried to think of what to say. At last she said quietly, "I'm sorry, Lucille." "That's okay," Lucille answered. "Well," said Mr. Brown, "I think this calls for a celebration." And when he had safely tucked the nest back on the sign, he poured 3 frosty glasses of lemonade. As they headed home, Rosie asked Lucille, "Do you want to come to my house? I saved you a piece of chocolate birthday cake." "Yum," said Lucille. "I love chocolate birthday cake. And guess what? I still have your present." "You do?" asked Rosie. "What is it?" Oh, it's a letter she wrote, and it says, "Happy birthday to my best friend Rosie. Love, Lucille." And there's a picture of the little chick hatching right there. Friends again. Well, I'm really glad that Rosie was able to realize she made a mistake and she apologized and said, I'm sorry to Lucille. And they had a really nice afternoon. They saved the nest together and then they celebrated Rosie's birthday. It seems like they're going to be good friends again and be able to play and learn together. All right, friends. Well, I miss you very much and I can't wait to see you next time. Have a great afternoon, great night, or great morning whenever you're watching this. Hugs to you all. Bye.